Hello, everyone. Hello, Eternal Life fans. I'm very excited today for this interview. I have Brenda Mathisen with me. She is a health expert from Metamed, a company that is very...
It's still saying starting soon.
Oh, it's still saying starting soon? Yeah. To me, it says it's live.
All right. Well, I guess we're live. Go for it.
I think we're live. All right, so yes, Brenda Mathisen is the Executive Vice President of Metamed, a company that's sort of doing the pioneering in personalized medicine. And she's also the President and CEO of Achieve Vitality. And she's a licensed massage therapist, a certified personal trainer. She's got a passion for health. This is what I love about her. I met her at RB 2014. She's really into self-help technology. She's a deep thinker, and she really is trying to find creative ways to solve problems. So, thank you for being with us today, Brenda.
Thank you, Rowan. It's great to meet all of you guys.
Awesome. So, I want this interview to kind of be about escape velocity. A lot of the Eternal Life fans, we are trying to live be as healthy as possible right now, live as long as possible so we can be alive for the escape velocity for when medicine helps us to live forever. So if you could just give a basic rundown of some of the personalized medicine, how Metamed can help us live longer and achieve the escape velocity.
Certainly, Ron. Well, as we were just talking about before this call started, there was a time when the thought of living forever was not even a possibility, that human beings had to accept death as something that was going to happen because fighting against it would be futile and would actually lead to them enjoying their lives less, and the stress of it would probably shorten their lifespan anyway. So for the first time in history, we're reaching a point in time where we can envision and are pretty close to a future where death is no longer a certainty, where it may become optional, and that may be able to happen within our lifetimes. So the concept of escape velocity is all about, now that we're close, how do we make sure that we are still alive when eternal life, physically, medically, becomes possible? So thinking about that, it's in a way a really simple formula. There's a certain point where science is right now in terms of the ability to diagnose and treat certain factors related to aging and either slow, stop, or reverse those factors. And there's a certain point that science will have to be at in order for us to live longer and then live indefinitely. So what we're trying to do is, as science continues to progress and we have technology to live longer and longer, utilizing as much of those technologies as possible in the right ways to keep extending our lifespan until we get to the point where it's all going to basically hit that point of full escape. So if any of you in the audience are scientists, you know that one of the biggest things that you can do is keep advancing science, understanding in a really focused way what is going to truly extend life. There's a lot of science out there about things that make people look healthier but aren't actually going to achieve longer and healthier lives in the long run. And advancing science is one of the biggest things that we can do, because that's how we're going to get to that point in time. The focus for most of us as individuals is what can we do to live longer, so that when that day comes, we're still around to enjoy it and to enjoy every moment that comes after. So the biggest thing is I've been a big fan for years of the idea of repair versus decay of the body. And it turns out that all of the top scientists in the field of rejuvenation are talking about it too. So you know, the idea is that as we go through life, we're wearing down our bodies every day. And that if we want to live forever, ultimately we need to be repairing all of those systems in our bodies at least as fast as we're wearing them down. So there are two main things you can do to extend that. One is wear yourself down slower, and the second is build yourself back up faster. And pretty much all of the longevity solutions are about that. You might have a third category, which is when things break, replace them. Although that has some of its own challenges where if you introduce something to the body that isn't inherent to it, you can disrupt other systems. So we're looking at some pretty complex problems, and it's really a field for exploration. So you guys are some of the pioneers in what does it look like, not just to live forever, which is the goal, but to create a life that will keep your body in the best shape possible so that you're really enjoying your life as well as going to keep it around for hundreds, thousands, or many more years to come.
Definitely. Could you give us a basic, some ideas of what we can do to those two things you said, not break our bodies down, slow down the breakdown, and also up the repair? Can you give us some ideas of what we could do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my specialty is in body work and personal training, so mostly focusing on the musculoskeletal system, muscles, bones, tendons, and then also on the nutrition underlying that our bodies need in order to keep everything running. So mostly I speak from that perspective. Some examples of wearing ourselves down, one of the things I see all the time is joints. That a major chronic issue in our culture right now is posture. And most of you sitting there are probably sitting like this. And each time you have two joints, so your vertebrae, for example, which are the most important joints in your body, because the intervertebral joints are supporting your vertebrae, which wraps your entire nervous system. It's really important to keep those healthy, both to keep your nervous system protected, to keep your body moving properly, and because if those joints get damaged, it causes inflammation, which then is one of the biggest causes of overall degeneration in the body. So if you have two vertebrae and they're sitting on top of each other, normally, then you have a nice even distribution of weight, and the joint is meant to handle that. So it may wear down very slowly over time, but because you're using it the way it was designed, it wears down very slowly, and the body is designed to be able to keep itself repaired and healthy. If all of a sudden you're using your joint this way, or from the side this way, you can see how there's going to be rubbing here, there's extra pressure, and the body isn't designed to repair you from that, because that's not how it was designed to work. So over time, not only do you get wearing away of cartilage, you can slip discs out the backside, you can lose lubrication in the joint, but then the effects that come from that, the inflammation, compensations that your body will do, meaning another joint will move weird in a different way, and then that joint can get damaged. You have these resonating effects that spread throughout your body. So whereas a lot of focus on longevity is what are these big shiny things that we can chase after, the magic pill that's going to fix everything, so much of the maintaining our health on a daily basis, especially until the magic pills come along, and I'm sure we will find some at some point. For now, we have simple things that we can do every day, just maintaining things by having them work right, that are going to keep things healthier much, much longer. It's the equivalent of rotating your tires and doing a tune-up on your car.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, what do you think is like the safest kind of exercise for people who are trying to increase their longevity? Would it be, like, just what comes to mind is swimming, because there's no impact on your joints. It's very, good.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
So if you're looking purely from a perspective of joint wear and tear, not taking into consideration cardio versus high-intensity intervals versus weight training, which have all different factors. If you're looking just from joint wear and tear, then doing low-impact exercise like swimming, like bicycling, something like yoga is going to be really good for your joints. The thing you have to be careful of with all of those is, of course, that you're using good form, because anything, whether it's weight-bearing or not, if you're using the joints in a way that's off, you're going to create some damage. Swimmers, you see all the time rotator cuff injuries from reaching overhead, and if those muscles aren't balanced, you end up with the lats being very tight and the pecs being short. So you get this type of movement, and every time you're putting your arm over your head, you're wearing down that joint. So if you're moving your arms well, you're keeping everything healthy. If you're moving them poorly, you're creating strain. And
Awesome.
same thing with cycling. Bicycling well with good form, great. Bicycling hunched over the handlebars, not so good for you.
All right, cool. So I want to change topics a little bit more into, I know you know a lot about Alzheimer's disease and how to increase your brain health. So give the Eternal Life fans some advice for how to have the optimal brain, because Alzheimer's disease, it was a big topic at RB 2014, and when I was talking to people, it's like the most feared disease. It's like my most feared disease. So how can we prevent Alzheimer's? And also mention this, you were talking about glyconutrients to help in the case of Alzheimer's disease. Just give a basic rundown of these things.
Okay. So quick disclaimer, I'm not a medical doctor and by no means an expert in Alzheimer's disease or brain or mental health. My experience is more from the nutritional perspective and also from the cognitive and mind-body side of things. So to just run through kind of the basics, you've got a few main factors. One is the physiological health, the structure of the neurons and the surrounding chemistry of your brain. Then you have your cognitive health, which means even if your brain is functioning perfectly, if you're not practicing certain cognitive skills, they can decay over time. And then the third is the overall health of your body, because ultimately whatever exists in your body is going to end up in your brain. And so various biochemical interactions that take place because of nutrition or because of stress will affect the way that your brain is firing. So in terms of the actual, well, I'll start with the easy ones. Overall physical health of your body kind of just wraps into taking good care of yourself, keeping everything balanced. If you're testing on a regular basis, making sure your nutrient levels are good and keeping yourself calm so you're not dealing with a lot of stress, all of the basics, then it's going to facilitate good brain chemistry, good brain health. Looking at the cognitive side of things, there are a lot of different, some good, some not so good, mental training programs to keep your brain sharp, both for old age and also performance enhancement. The only thing I'll say for today, because that becomes a whole other topic, is that practice makes perfect. Use it or lose it. That if you want the mental skills to continue being around, then use them. Then going into the actual brain health, it's important that the brain, like anything else, is also regenerating itself every moment of every day. There used to be some nasty rumors that brain cells cannot regrow, so if you kill them, then you're just going to get stupider over time. That has been shown to not be at all true. So that's good news for all you guys and any of us who have a brain. Our brain, like any other part of our body, is always regrowing. And so again, you're looking at not wearing your brain down faster, and that means not only killing large numbers of individual cells, but also just doing damage to the brain as a whole and giving your brain what it needs to repair itself. So in terms of not wearing it down, there's the obvious lifestyle stuff, like drinking various types of drugs, mental stress, like the healthy kind of stress where you're thinking hard, doing a lot of cognitive work, has its own kind of wear and tear. Not necessarily in a bad way, but it depletes certain nutrients. So you want to make sure that you're replenishing those nutrients if you're thinking a lot. If you want, I can get the names of some of the most important nutrients in that and post it after our talk.
Is egg yolks would be a good thing to do that? Because I know egg yolks are high in choline and they're high in cholesterol and all this stuff for your brain. Is that a good thing for your brain?
So I believe choline is one of the good ones for your brain. However, then you get into, with egg yolks, you have cholesterol, you have a whole bunch of different micronutrients. So that becomes another topic. Right? I forget who it was who said it. It says, you know that the field of nutrition is not terribly advanced when you can't sit down a panel of nutritionists and have them agree on something as simple as, is an egg good for you?
Yeah.
Right, and so if you start with something as broad stroke as good for you, it's impossible to give a straight answer.
Yeah, and it depends on your own individual body, right? An egg yolk might be fine for someone else, and it might be bad for someone else, but it also might depend on how you cook the egg. Are you cooking the yolk, into a hard little thing, or are you eating it raw into a smoothie? There's different things you could do with it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Everything is context dependent. What is actually going on in the interaction between what comes from the egg, gets changed when it's cooked, gets digested in your body, makes it through your intestinal wall, into your bloodstream, through the blood-brain barrier, and then attaches in different ways to the neurons. So, it's not as straightforward as saying x plus y equals z. It's more like x, then changed so it's x prime plus a, and then turned into, it's, and each of our bodies is going to process that egg differently. So going back to what you were asking before, specifically about glyconutrients, they're one really interesting field of study these days. There's millions of dollars of research being put into that around the world. And they have some really interesting properties, although when they work and how much they work is still being tested. The basics of glyconutrients, for those of you who don't know what they are, is all of our cells are covered in these little antennae called glycoproteins that have a glycan, which is a sugar, and an amino acid, or protein, hence glycoprotein. And those little antennas are both how the cells communicate with each other, and it's also how your immune system recognizes if those cells are healthy and if they're your cells versus a foreign invader. The difference between different blood types, being AB versus A, is the difference of one different glycan. If you have a different sugar in there, you're a different blood type. So these sugars are a really essential part, just like the essential amino acids. They're an essential part of our bodies. So they're really good for health overall, as well as for brain health. There are some additional structures in the brain that use a lot of glycans. So it's one of the reasons that at least some studies are showing at this point that they're really helpful in helping brains recover after stroke, prevent or be able to manage symptoms of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all of these others.
Could you briefly touch on how people could get these glyconutrients in their diet? Because I heard that seaweed has all of the different glyconutrients. Have you heard that?
There's a lot of misinformation out there about anything nutritional. Mm-hmm. Currently, the FDA doesn't. It will regulate, or what is the term? It oversees but doesn't fully regulate nutrition. So whereas if you have a pharmaceutical, it's either FDA approved. Not that that always means very much, or it's not. With nutrition, there is no certification process for if something is good quality or if it's good for you. So you're kind of in a no man's land where there's a lot of guesswork and there's a lot of bad science paid for by people who want to make a lot of money. Or just people who are trying to do the best thing but don't have the right information. So in terms of seaweed having all of the glycans, I would say it's likely that some seaweed does, but other seaweed doesn't, and you'd have to figure it out on an individual basis. Mm-hmm. There are different species of seaweed and then also where it's grown and harvested.
All right, so we have about 10 more minutes until we get to some audience question and answers. But before that, I just want to pick your brain on a few more of the hot topics in life extension. So I'd like to know what your opinion is on calorie restriction. Is that a good, viable way to reduce the breakdown of your body, slow the metabolism, and ultimately extend your life? Do you think that's a good thing to do?
So based on what the evidence is showing right now, overall calorie restriction seems to show extended lifespan. Then the question is why? Because there are different factors that affect it. Overall, reducing the number of calories taken in extends life, which would make sense if you think of it as the less food you're ingesting, the less energy your body has to spend to digest that food, and also the body will slow down your metabolism and actually become more efficient in how it uses the resources it has. So your body is wearing itself down less quickly. that's assuming that you're still getting excellent nutrition with a lower calorie diet, which means you have to be very careful about the nutrients that you're taking in. There are a lot of studies out there, though, that show that reducing specific nutrients or specific types like fat or carbohydrates in your diet without reducing the overall number of calories can have similar benefits. So based on what the research is showing right now, the overall safe bet, if you don't have personalized information about what's going on in your body and what types of nutrition are good for you, then overall less calories seem to be a better thing. But there are a lot of other factors, like what you're actually eating.
Yeah, and let me just add, this would be a perfect place to add, is that, have you heard about the huge idea that restricting methionine can actually increase your life? There's a certain amino acid that reduces your lifespan. It's highest in animal products and meat and things like that. And so it could be a lot of these studies are finding that it could just be the restriction of methionine that's actually responsible for the increased length of life. Just back to what you were saying.
That may be true, and I know there's some research on that. I was also hearing, actually, at the RB 2014 conference where we met, some researchers talking about another study that was done comparing the methionine restriction to another diet where I believe it was other amino acids were restricted and there was extra methionine put back in. And so it turned out that reducing methionine only helps if you have other amino acids in your diet. I would have to try to look up exactly what the other nutrients were, but it's a combination of the methionine with other nutrients that seems to be causing those issues. So again, the research can be very misleading, which is why it's always important to stay on top of what's really going on. Because although the studies may have been done well, and it may have been the case that pulling methionine out of the diet helped extend life, why did it do that? Was it actually methionine, or was it something else that was going on as a result of that study?
Definitely. You know, as they say, the devil's in the details, right? And so you can't be misled by what's on the surface, you know? There might be more to the story.
Yep. So there's this balance we play between trying to keep up with the latest data and then based on that data doing the best we can with where science is at to keep ourselves healthy with what we know, just recognizing that we don't know everything.
All right, so now on to the next hot topic is telomeres. Okay, so first of all, would Metamed test people for their telomere length? And also just your general opinions on some practical ways that Eternal Life fans can increase their telomeres. Is there certain supplements? I heard that the herb astragalus can help increase your telomeres. Have you heard about that? It's actually what they're extracting stuff from astragalus root for these top telomerase enhancing products. If you heard about that, give your opinions on that. Or any other ways you can increase our telomeres.
Sure. So the research seems to point to telomeres tend to shorten over time. So they seem to be either one of the factors or a byproduct of one of the factors of aging. In terms of does Metamed test for them, we usually don't because it's not the cheapest test, right? So we only test for it if someone specifically wants to know that. For most people, the low-hanging fruit to increase their health is actually so extensive that you can do a lot to improve your health without ever getting to the point of actually testing telomeres. Right? There are certain things that are easy to test and easy to change, and for most people, focusing on those are actually the best things for any form of life extension or health improvement. In terms of what the best supplements are for telomere extension, it's not my area of expertise, so I don't have a lot of data on that. If that's something you want to know more about, I can try to put you in touch with someone who has those answers. Okay.
So let's get into, like, a lot of the Eternal Life fans are total, like, health nuts, like me, and so I want to know, what are some of the the main pitfalls that could face, people who are trying to be healthy? Things that we might be doing wrong that we might not know. What are some of the, pitfalls?
Oh, totally. That's a huge one. And I myself, total health nut. It was a combination of like, my mom always really believed in being healthy, so I grew up with that. And then had a lot of my own health issues early on, so I had to become completely obsessed with doing everything right to keep myself healthy and get myself better and better over time, which is a lot of how I learned what I did, both what to do and what not to do. So I've fallen into a bunch of these pitfalls, and then I've watched a lot of my clients, my friends, my family fall into some of the other ones. I think some of the big ones are, especially in the United States, there is no labeling for GMOs and a lot of other things that end up in our food. And so it's very easy to be misled about what you're really eating. Certain things, especially wheat and corn, are almost entirely genetically modified, which means that they actually have types of proteins and other molecules that are the expression of their modified genes that don't exist in natural, non-genetically modified corn and wheat. And the same is actually true not only of genetically modified, but even the hybridized ones that have been bred for having extra gluten for baking, or been bred for having being able to grow faster so that they can be farmed more easily. Most farming has been geared toward making money and not toward making things healthier. So you have to be very careful about the quality of ingredients that you're choosing to begin with. And it's really hard, especially if you're eating any kind of packaged food. So that's number one. Another pitfall is doing the things that you know are good for you and ignoring the things that you don't know. And it's hard to know because you don't know what you don't know. Some of the common ones that many of us miss are food sensitivities. Food sensitivities aren't a full allergy, like if you ate a piece of shrimp and your throat blew up. That would be a full anaphylactic allergy. Food sensitivities are different in that you eat the food, you don't have an immediate life-threatening response, but your body is creating inflammation as a result, which means that your white blood cells are basically treating some byproduct of that food as an invader and throwing histamines at it, creating an allergic response. So that's then increasing inflammation in your whole body, which is the same way that if you have bad respiratory seasonal allergies, your whole body kind of gets inflamed, you feel worse overall, everything's fuzzy, you get sick more easily. You have the same thing happen because of those food sensitivities. And it can take up to 4 days for your body to start responding to a food after you eat it, so it's very hard to pin down what's causing it. There are a couple of different tests that will test for that. One is the ALCAT test. I know the founder of that, who invented the test, and that was actually a tremendous breakthrough in helping with my own health at one point as well. And something that I struggled for years and had no idea why certain foods made me feel bad, and then it turned out that I was actually sensitive to 40% of normal food ingredients. So it's doing the right things and not just working as hard as you can for them, but making sure you're hitting all the right things. Another major one, let's see, what's a really good one that
can you speak on a little bit on some of the fad diets, the specific ones like, the paleo diet or the high carbohydrate diet, the high fat diet, different macronutrient ratios. Also just touch on like what your opinion is of the raw food diet. Is it important to eat 100% raw foods, or is that a too extreme? I mean, do we need to be eating 100%, or can we eat like a lot of raw foods but also include some healthy cooked foods? Just your opinion on those things.
Sure. You had asked about high fat diet, paleo, raw, and there was one other.
And high carbohydrate?
High carb? Okay.
Like there's a lot of people who are eating tons of fruit. Like this is the 80-10-10 diet. They just they think it's best to have 80% of your calories coming from carbohydrates. And they think it's pretty much that way for everyone. They don't individualize it. They just think everyone should just be eating 80% calories from fruit. I mean, what do you think about that?
So there's some pretty strong evidence that It's certainly not true across the board, and it's generally not true. The research I've seen is that, I mean, different people's bodies definitely do better with different macronutrient distributions. Most people, about 80%, do better on a paleo diet, a paleo type of low carbohydrate diet, than a high carb diet. There are certain body types that do not process protein well and/or do not process fats well, in which case a high carb diet with the right kinds of carbohydrates, lots of quality fruits and vegetables, would be good for them, but that's probably a very small minority of people. If you think back, Steve Jobs was a big fan of, he went on all of these crazy fruit and veggie diets where he'd eat nothing but carrots for 2 months. And you can see that that didn't necessarily keep him healthy overall.
That's right. I mean, that feeds cancer. I mean, but if you're just eating carbohydrates all the time, you're just going to be feeding your cancer cells, right?
It can be. And again, it's how the body responds to different types of nutrients. It's, I try really hard not to draw too many generalizations, because that's most of where we go wrong, is believing, oh, this thing worked in a study, therefore it's good for everyone. Or this thing didn't work in a study and caused harm, therefore it's bad for everyone. That can be untrue too. So in terms of a paleo diet, it seems to be one of the healthier diets for most people if you're assuming, again, quality nutrients. I eat mostly paleo myself, and I've worked with a lot of other health practitioners who teach different versions of the paleo diet. Some of the most important things are, some people have gone on Atkins or paleo low carbohydrate diets and just eaten pork rinds and other, very high salt, high poor quality fat diets, which is not healthy for you. If you're doing paleo right, you're focusing on 100% grass-fed meats, which have a much higher omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, so that the quality of fats that you're getting are good, and you're also getting good quality proteins. And the few carbohydrates that you do eat are, again, good quality, either healthy fruits or honey, maple syrup, something like that.
To comment one thing on the paleo diet, a lot of people would be concerned with. You touched on this briefly before, but cholesterol. What do you say to all those people who are like, well, hey, look, the paleo diet's high in cholesterol. I can't be eating that stuff. Is the cholesterol a myth? Is it bad? Does it really cause heart disease? Just can you touch a little bit more on that?
So, I mean, cholesterol is another nutrient. We have this tendency to create characters that that represent the different types of food we eat, as if you could paint a big mustache and angry face on cholesterol and have cartoons of it running around and beating up your heart. But ultimately, it's a nutrient that you're putting in your body. You need some of it, and too much of it, if your body doesn't have the genes to deal with it effectively, can be a bad thing. It's actually, I believe I remember reading some research where a high cholesterol diet that also had a high omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is better for at least some people than having a low-fat diet, because we need cholesterol in our bodies. We need all sorts of different fats. The cell membrane of every single cell in your body is made of fat. Without fat, we wouldn't have cells and we wouldn't be alive to begin with. So fat is neither good or bad. Cholesterol is neither good or bad. It's worth checking if you have a family history of high cholesterol, because I know people who, no matter how they eat, always have off-the-charts cholesterol. No heart disease, though, just high cholesterol. And other people who always have very low. I eat a very high-fat diet, and my cholesterol is very, very low, extremely healthy, even though probably 40–50% of my diet is fat. It is good to be balancing, if you're doing paleo, not just getting all of your fat from meat, but also things like avocado, olive oil, walnut oil, the coconut oil as well, things that are high in omega-3s versus omega-6s, but are not fully saturated fats or cholesterol.
Awesome. Okay, so I just have a few more questions before we open it up to the audience questions. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion on salt? like, should people be eating some sea salt in their diet, or is salt something that just people should just avoid regardless of it's sea salt or table salt or anything? I mean, is salt an okay thing to be eating?
Salt is essential in the diet. We need some amount of it to function, right? It's part of electrolytes, and we need that for our muscles to work, for our brains to work, anything electrical that goes on in our bodies. Salt has gotten a bad reputation because it's been overused in a lot of processed food, but I've done this myself in the past, and I know a lot of others who have cooked all of their own food and not salted anything and ended up kind of salt deficient. So it's important to be having at least a small amount of salt in your diet. If you're eating any kind of processed foods, you probably have enough. And if you're doing a fully raw diet or cooking all of your own food at home, then you probably want to add a little bit of salt to that. In terms of types of salt, table salt is processed with some toxic chemicals that leave trace residue on the salt itself. So if you eat normal table salt, you're actually eating some toxic chemicals along with it. So I avoid that as much as possible. Impossible in the United States to avoid it completely, but I try to reduce that. And then kosher salt or sea salt are generally not processed in that way, so you're not taking in the toxic stuff at the same time. And then, of course, sea salt having the added benefit of some additional micronutrients.
All right. Now I'm just going to ask one last question before we open it up to the audience. So if I were to ask, what is the biggest thing we can do right now to extend our life?
Wow, that is a big question, because that's the foundations of everything. We're either alive or we're not, right? So there are so many little things that we can do, and it's really easy to get caught up in all the details and miss out on the big picture. So if I were to pick one thing, I would say it's keep it personalized to you. There is a lot of information out there, and the fact that we have as much data as we do about what is good and what may be harmful is amazing. So keeping on top of that data as best you can and evaluating those trends, not just saying, hey, that trend looks great, or the person who's eating that diet looks really hot, so I'm going to try that myself, but what's the research on that? And using your brain to come up with pretty good theories about will this work for me or not, and then testing that on yourself in a safe way, of course, not doing anything too crazy, but applying the scientific method, trying this new diet, changing one thing at a time, ideally, and keeping data on how does this affect how I feel, how does this affect my performance, and over time you'll start to see trends about what works for you and what doesn't, which allows you to try more and more effective things over time. So there's an extent to which everything has to be personalized because your genes are different than anyone else's, and the same things that are extending someone else's life could actually shorten yours. There's a lot of evidence that there are things like that through our entire health culture. So using as much data as you can from around you, and then collecting data on what works for you specifically. Metamed exists basically to be able to highly personalize data, and then if you're doing it on your own, you can still get a level of personalization just from seeing how your body feels. It's not the most precise measurement, but ultimately it's the most true to you.
Definitely. There's that old saying that says one man's food is another man's poison. Aubrey de Grey, he always says, listen to your body. Just listen closely to how your body is reacting to whatever you're doing, whatever lifestyle interventions you're doing, whether it be diet, exercise. Just listen to your body. So I think that's great advice. So we're going to be opening up to audience questions. If any of the audience has any questions, please ask your questions. Oh, we've already got several. All right, so let's start with David Wood. He asks, Brenda, what a great concept you have developed. Do you Do you ever have anyone who contacts Metamed and ever asks, can you help them live longer or forever? Rodney Berry of Adam and Eve Research, of Adam and Eve World Research. Sorry. That question wasn't by David Wood. I got it wrong. That question was by Rodney Berry of Adam and Eve World Research. Now I know how to read it. I got it mixed up.
All right, cool.
It was actually by Betty Berry. That question was from Betty Berry.
All right. Well, thanks, Betty, for that question. Great question. We have people contacting us, everything from I'm going to die in 6 weeks. Is there anything you can do to save my life? And we've had some really amazing successes with that, which is one form of life extension. We have a lot of people asking for greater quality of life, and then also the life extension. So a lot of what we're looking at there is general health, and we do a full testing panel on all of your nutrient levels, metabolics, hormone levels, brain function, other organ function. We're looking for, is there anything that's already starting to drop that you need to be careful of now? Because that's the most important thing, is like one thing in your body goes off, and that can be the end of your life. So we need to make sure that everything, each individual piece is staying healthy, and then we're looking at, after that, once we know that everything overall is working well, how do we set up a system to keep it working well and actually get you healthier over time as much as possible?
Awesome, great answer. Okay, next question is by David Wood. He asks, does Metamed face any of the same regulatory issues which are threatening to restrict the kind of advice and info delivered by DNA testing agencies such as 23andMe? David Wood asks that.
Yeah, great question, David. That is one of the challenges that we see show up all the time. The FDA's focus is trying to protect public safety and trying to do that at a large scale. So they're doing the best they can to regulate a really fast-changing world with a lot of really intense implications. And what we're trying to do is make sure that every individual has access to the best healthcare possible, the best of everything that exists, whether or not it's made it through a specific process. Because there are people who absolutely, if it's not FDA approved, they won't touch it, and that's important to respect. And there are other people who say either I'm about to die or I want to try this. What exists in the world? So our approach is Metamed is not a medical practice, so we don't diagnose or treat, and we don't make recommendations. Simply looking at the data of what is out there, how trustworthy is the evidence behind it, and based on that, statistically, what do your outcomes look like based on that, and where are the sources where you could get it if you wanted to. And then it's ultimately up to each individual and their doctor to make those choices for themselves. Awesome.
Great answer. Oh, thank you, David, for that question. All right, the next question we have is by Felipe Castongue, and this is there a time of day where the absorption of nutrients is more effective? For example, it's been shown in 2003 by a Niedergard, I don't know how to say that word, that the interstitial space in the brain increases during sleep, allowing a faster transfer of the cerebrospinal fluid. Did you get that question?
Mm-hmm. So my specialty is not all of the internal medicine or biochemistry, so I'm not sure if there is a specific time of day where the body absorbs more through digestion. It sounds like you're asking specifically about nutrients being able to cross the blood-brain barrier. I don't have a lot to say specifically on that topic since it's not my specialty. One thing I do know is there's a great book out there, I think it's called Potatoes Not Prozac, and it's about specifically the amino acid tryptophan. Tryptophan is part of, I believe it's serotonin and possibly a couple of other hormone creation. And so if that's not getting through the blood-brain barrier, then you're going to be missing some key nutrients that you need for your brain. the theory behind the research that book is based on is, since tryptophan is one of the smaller amino acids, it tends to get left out if you have any other amino acids circulating in your blood. So by timing when you have protein versus when you have carbohydrates throughout the day and not eating protein directly before bed, it allows the tryptophan to cross the blood-brain barrier. So based on that, I would say it definitely seems plausible that certain nutrients are taken in better into the brain at different times of the day, and also different times relative to meals, relative to exercise, relative to sleep. And there is likely more evidence out there if you want to search for it. So it's worth considering. And again, if anyone has further questions or wants answers to things that I don't know, I'm happy to try to help connect you with resources.
Awesome. Okay, let's take another question from the audience. This is by the same person. Are nutrients more well absorbed if they are taken in isolation from others? For example, is it more effective to take an omega-3 source by itself or with other food?
Okay. I think that's going to depend highly on the nutrient. Iron, for example, there are specific things that you need to help it be absorbed, and there are other things that will actually reduce absorption. So if you're taking in iron with foods that have iron absorption increasing agents, then you're going to absorb more. But if you have them with food, for example, spinach and a couple of other leafy greens have certain chemicals that will actually reduce your iron absorption, then you're not going to absorb as much. That is likely going to be true for pretty much anything you eat, that certain things enhance and certain things reduce. So in terms of, from my understanding, the omega-3s are not majorly impacted. It's more the micronutrients. Omega-3s really fall into a macronutrient category. So I think you should be pretty safe taking those either way. Information if you'd like.
That's great for that. So we're done with the audience questions for now. The audience can continue asking questions, but until we get more questions, let me just finish with some more questions of my own. So, Brenda, could you please discuss the topic of gluten in the diet? A lot of people think that it's okay to have gluten as long as you're not a celiac. But then there's other people that say, no, regardless of whether you have celiac disease or not, gluten is just something that you should not be in your diet. What is your take on the gluten issue?
Okay. So gluten overall, it can cause different problems for different people. And if it's causing any of those problems for you, even if it doesn't cause other ones, it should be avoided. So there are people, for example, who do not have celiac disease, but do have a food sensitivity to gluten. And in that case, again, even without the celiac, you would want to avoid it. If you don't want to do all of the testing for all of the problems gluten could cause, then the safe thing is to leave it out of your diet. And there are a number of kind of tangential health benefits that come with removing gluten from your diet. You tend to eat less calories overall. You tend to eat less grains and therefore more fruits and vegetables, and less processed foods, since most processed foods contain gluten. So I would say if there were, for most people, if there were one thing to remove from your diet that would make the biggest health difference, it would either be gluten or it would be dairy products. So gluten is one of the things that causes the most problems for the most people. So if you want to look at all the data and decide that you are one of the few people who gluten doesn't cause any problems for, then go for it. If you don't have all the personalized data, the safe bet is definitely avoid it. There's some really good information about gluten in the book Wheat Belly.
I'm familiar with it. It's very great. We'll share the links in this the end of this interview.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's a great book. I've watched his lectures. I'm convinced. I'm against gluten. I mean, I can't touch gluten. I'm afraid of it. I'm a health nut. I got to be afraid of some stuff.
Well, fear is not good for your health.
Well, some people say that fear is only bad for your health if you believe it's bad for your health, but that's another topic. All right, so here's David Wood asks another question. All right, so he says, how different do you expect the advice you would give to people on this topic in 5 years' time will be to today's advice?
Very different. Right now, especially in terms of nutrition, it's an emerging field. You see across different scientific fields the same kind of growth curve happening, where first no one even considers that it's a possibility that it could have a difference. Then people start to consider it and everyone thinks they're crazy. Then the mainstream starts to absorb it, or at least, a core group of people who are interested in it absorb it. Then it starts to spread to mainstream, and as it spreads to mainstream, there's more and more research done. And for a while, that research is then fairly poor quality. We're more exploring what might make a difference. It's a lot of generating hypotheses and seeing where should we even be looking for data, which is basically where we're at with nutrition right now. Right? We have a lot of, Whole Foods, Walmart is now offering organic food. That's a tremendous advancement from where we were 5 or 10 years ago, and from where most non-American first world countries are even. So we're doing pretty well compared to the rest of the globe. And what we're going to start seeing over the next 5 or so years is, once we've pinned down what factors in our food, in our lifestyles, make the biggest difference, and what is it about how we absorb and process each of those foods that makes the difference, then we're going to get more specific answers. Like, I would be able to tell you, okay, well, if you take omega-3s with this thing, it will enhance absorption. If you take it with this thing and these other things, it will decrease. If you take it this time of day, and we'll be able to go through all of the mechanics. We'll kind of have mapped out how the body processes, transports, and then uses all of these different nutrients in much more detail. And the more we understand about that, the less guessing and the more just measuring we'll be able to do. So I think, especially with the quantified self movement, where people are taking constant measurements of everything that their body is doing, there are a lot of companies evolving in that space to try to help people measure what's going on in their bodies. Within 5 years, the quantified self movement is going to be huge and going mainstream. And with the data coming from our own bodies and with the advancements in what we know about what to do with that data, we're going to just be in a whole different world. We'll have many, many more answers than we do now. Right now, just having the right questions is a good thing.
Awesome. I should let you elaborate more on, you said fear is bad for your health. Could you elaborate for the audience more specifically what you're talking about there, and what how is fear bad for your health? I'm curious.
Sure. So it's stress in the body, which can lead to cortisol release, inflammation, a whole bunch of different things, and is one of those things that over time actually creates more degradation in your body. So whereas what we consider the more positive or relaxing emotions, or even more joyful emotions, not necessarily relaxing, it could be inspiring, tend to create a sense of relaxation in the body, releasing different neurochemicals, releasing different hormones in the body that have a protective effect. So it's important, though, in looking at the fear bit, to recognize that there are basically 3 different factors, and it's important not to conflate those and just say is or is not good. The stressor to begin with, which can be fear, or it can be an external factor such as your boss yelling at you, versus an internally based, I'm afraid this food is bad for me. Then there's your physiological response to that, and then there's your mental response, which then creates another physiological response. The stressor itself is not necessarily a bad thing unless it physically damages you. Most things like your boss yelling at you are not actually causing direct physical harm to your body. It's the indirect effects that over time stresses you out and causes problems. And those indirect effects are, 1, if you have stress build up that you're not releasing, then it goes from eustress, EU stress, which is basically when your body is stressed and then uses that stress for a positive purpose, it triggers regeneration in the body. And again, this is kind of a generalization, but it's a pretty good model to think of. And then if you let it build up and don't express or do something to manage that stress, it becomes distress, which is then what causes inflammation, causes harm. And then the third thing you need to be aware of is what we call the placebo effect, which is a very real thing. There's some really good research going on at Harvard Medical School. A friend of mine is a researcher there. He actually came from an acupuncture background and was fascinated by what's the psychologically generated, what's the psychogenic aspect of people getting better, how much of acupuncture is physiological versus mental. And a lot of what they've been finding, the placebo effect is real. It's an actual physical effect on the body happening because of the release of dopamine and a number of other chemicals in response to our beliefs or our thoughts. So basically, your brain is its own pharmacy. You know, we're so used to looking for external things to come into us and fix us, when really we're a walking pharmacy. And there's a tremendous amount you can do by studying the mind-body connection to change which types of hormones you're creating on a regular basis and other biochemicals that you're putting into your body on a regular basis, and that has a tremendous effect on health. Interestingly, different people respond differently to the placebo effect. One of the major factors seems to be dopamine receptors. People, because dopamine is one of the things that the brain releases in the placebo effect, people with lots of dopamine receptors are very responsive to the placebo effect, meaning you can talk yourself into feeling much better really easily. Whereas if you don't have a lot of dopamine receptors, you have a much weaker response to it. So there's a whole world of what's actually happening when you feel fear or excitement on a physiological level in your body, and how does that affect health and longevity. It's
yeah,
really cool.
That's fascinating. What would you tell someone like okay, I have a huge fear of death. All right, that's like it's huge for me. A lot of Eternal Life fans have a huge fear of death as well. So what would your advice for us be if we don't feel like we can help it? And we also, I personally think that like the fear of death, I always say fear of death is like a superpower. Okay, the fear of death, what it does is it's a strong motivation, right? It motivates me. There's nothing else that motivates me more than like wanting to avoid death and being afraid of it. So I don't know, what's your thoughts on that? What's your opinion about? What would your advice be to someone like me?
About the fear itself, or about what to do about it?
The fear itself. I mean, do you really think that fear I have is going to hurt my health? Is it going to be bad for me, you think? Is there any way that that it won't be bad for me? Because I don't think I can remove my fear. I feel like it's just part of who I am, you know what I mean? But it's like a motivational type of fear. It's maybe even a good, beneficial type of fear. Is that possible? Is there such a thing as like a positive fear?
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying about eustress versus distress, is that when you have even what we would consider a negative emotion, but you channel it positively, right? You're turning fear into inspiration, into passion, into leadership. And that's what's created this whole community that we're a part of today. That when you take there are things that we can change and there are things that we can't, but we can always find creative ways to use the things we can't change to make things really exciting. So we may be able to change how long we can almost certainly change how long we live. We may even be able to change if we ever die. Not knowing is still going to be scary.
Mm-hmm.
And even people who accept that they're going to die, no one's really particularly happy about it. It's just having different levels of repression or acceptance around it.
Well, some people, wait a second. Some people really are happy because they're very confident, even certain. They claim to be certain that there is an afterlife. And so if you're certain that there is some paradise awaiting you after death, you might actually be happy. You might actually be looking forward to your death. A lot of people are.
Yeah, but you see it all the time in real life, and if you don't know Christians, you've probably seen it in movies. You know, you have like the 3-year-old whose mom just died, and dad says, "Don't worry, your mom is going to a better place."
Yeah.
But the 3-year-old's automatic reaction is not, "Oh yay, mommy's going to a happy place." She has to be taught that, and even the father who's trying to tell her that is not happy. So
True.
you have to look at what people are actually feeling and experiencing, because we have a tremendous capacity to delude ourselves. And so I won't speak during this conversation as to, you know, like whether there is an afterlife or not, because we don't have any strong, tangible evidence on that either way. But
I
whether
agree.
or
I
not
think
there is, our
it's
human nature is not to be happy about death. Our
yeah.
human nature is to be afraid of it, to resist it at all costs, unless we're brainwashed to just accept it. And so if you have that fear, you may not be able to get rid of that fear, but you can channel that into something positive by taking better care of yourself, by helping to promote the advancement of science or teach other people about ways that they can extend their life. And so, you know, there's a big difference between going through life. I'll give just like a diet example, being like, oh my God, I can't eat food because then I'll get fat, or like if I eat any of this, it's going to make my body get, you know, and look, you know, you can see the stress bubbling up, and you might decide to eat healthier because of that, but you're killing yourself inside. Versus, I love myself, I love my body, I want to take care of myself. Why would I eat that? And that
Exactly.
becomes,
Yeah.
you're turning a very disempowering emotion into an empowering emotion, and that allows you to take action on it, which actually improves your outcomes or your expected outcomes. And it's on a psychological and physiological level, helping to protect yourself in a real way, not just in a denial kind of way. So overall, I mean, the best thing we can do about anything in life is accept the facts and see how far we can twist those facts to what we want to see in the world. And that's what science is all about. That, you know, science is primarily about exploration. What is real? And then secondarily, well, what can we do about it? So if you keep taking that approach to life and go in not with a delusional level of positivity, but being able to both stay real and be present with all of the negative stuff that might be true, even if you don't like it, and at the same time keep a positive attitude, then you'll be able to find a way to turn the negative stuff into positive stuff. If you ignore the negative, then you can't do anything about it. If you get lost in the negative, you won't do anything about it. So you really have to have both at once.
Well said, well said. You know, I love how you talked about, you know, flipping the negative into a positive. Like, for me, that's how I view fear of death. The fear of death for me is really just the love of life. It's because I love life that I fear death. And to me, it's a positive thing, and I can channel it positively. So that's a great comment. Let's take another question from Felipe. Felipe Castagongue. What would be the most stated pseudoscience practices to increase longevity and health in general, and can you debunk them? Interesting question.
Ooh, yeah, great question, Felipe. Let me think of one or two good ones for you. So, longevity myths that we want to debunk. So I think one of the myths is assuming that science is just going to magically fix everything, and that we should just keep doing what we're doing and hope that someone else takes care of the problem. It's the tragedy of the commons issue that we've seen forever. And on one level, you have someone has to do it, and if you care, then it should be you, because you know, no one who doesn't care is going to do it. Someone's got to step up and make it happen. And also, and that's why I love the concept of this group, is that until we get there, we still need to be doing everything we can to not just still be alive, but still be healthy. Because the last thing you want is for science to figure out how to keep people young forever, but you've already tore down your body, and so you're going to be a decrepit 90-year-old man for the next 20 millennia, you know? So that there is no just sit and make it someone else's problem and hope. That becoming an active part of anything you care about, it has to be a part of it. Another aging myth, this is one of my favorites. I used to get this all the time when I was doing rehab massage. So I was working with chiropractors, so I had a lot of people with spinal degeneration, slipped discs, nerve damage, scoliosis, everything. You name it. Basically, if it made the body hurt, I ended up seeing it. And I had so many people coming in with various kinds of pains, injuries, degenerative conditions, and they would either say, well, I asked them, you know, what's going on? What do you want to work on? They're like, well, there's that thing, but you couldn't do anything about that. I'm like, really? Try me. Or, oh, well, I mean, my knees kind of ache, but that's just me getting older. And I'm like, just you get, no. That's not how this works. And with a lot of those people, I had one guy who's actually a running coach who couldn't run anymore because he had a bad disc, and you know, he didn't think that I could help. Within about half hour, 45 minutes, he was like, "Oh my God, I feel like I could get up off the table and run again." You know, and obviously 30, 40 minutes doesn't fix a long condition like that permanently, but like the fact was he felt it in his body that aging is not a one-way street, that things don't just keep getting worse until you die, that when you have the right tools and when you have the mindset to try, things can get better. And I see that with joint problems, people coming in, they actually have osteoarthritis. They may or may not ever grow back, or at least I don't have the tools to help them with that. However, going back to the joint model from earlier, if your joint's been going like this and you have no more cartilage here, it's going to hurt to go like this. But if you get the joint realigned, there's still plenty of cartilage here, and now the joint can move healthfully without worrying about the fact that there's some degeneration. Right, so there's a lot of good stem cell research into actually being able to repair cartilage, being able to reverse damage that's already been done. But even if there's damage that you don't know how to reverse yet, you can do so much to improve your quality of life and stay healthy. Anyone who tells you this can't be fixed, there's nothing that can be done, is full of it. That's why I stopped seeing any medical doctors for a while, because I was diagnosed with a genetic disease I didn't have. And then I had really bad hypoglycemia at the time. I had a dropped metatarsal in my foot, and I had a couple of other things going on. And I just heard from one of the better doctors who was recommended for really knowing her stuff, just that there's nothing that can be done, you know, take a baby aspirin, do this kind of thing. And I'm like, that's not how I want to live my life. You know, I was like 20, and I'm like, if I'm already screwed when I'm 20, like, what's my future going to look like? And I refuse to accept that as my fate. So I ended up being able to fix all of that. My blood sugar is completely healthy. I don't have to do anything to manage it anymore. Fixed the foot issue. I figured out what was causing the clotting issue, which was not a genetic disease. I do have a genetic tendency toward it, but that was something completely separate. It was actually stress that was causing the numbers to come back wrong on the tests.
Wow.
And so, like, I gave up on, I love medicine, but unfortunately many people who practice medicine believe that medicine is limited to what they know. I don't believe in any system that believes in hard limitations, and that you can always improve things. You can always improve things.
I agree, and good for you for, you know, figuring out the solutions for your health problems and really taking charge of your health. I think that's admirable.
Thanks.
So we have another question from the audience. David Wood asks, I know this interview is going a little over time, but we'll just keep on going as long as there's an interest, and we might shut it off before 12:30. So that's
yeah, I do have to get going after this question because I have
All right, cool. So we'll just take this last question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Perfect.
So would Brenda agree with the advice in the so-called Serenity Prayer of Reinhold Niebuhr? God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Would you agree with that?
You may or may not choose to believe the God part, but the rest of it I absolutely agree with. I used to believe that there was nothing that couldn't be changed. So I kind of hated that prayer because it implied that there were things that couldn't be fixed.
Yes, I agree.
So here's what I've found over time. This is one of those kind of philosophical issues that's always in the back of my mind. So thank you, David, for bringing it up. The hardest thing is knowing the difference. And we tend to believe that things are out of our control when they're not. If you too easily accept other people's beliefs about what can and cannot be changed, then you're going to limit yourself a lot. But believing you can change things that you can't, or believing you can change things faster than you could, is a better way of putting it, can also lead to problems because you set expectations for yourself, make promises that you then can't keep. So it's not so much a matter of what can be changed or not, because we'll find a way. It may take 2,000 years, might take 20,000 years, but we'll find a way. So it's the way I think about it now is, how long will it take me to make this change? And what resources and how much effort will have to go into it? And that gives me a much more realistic understanding of what I'm really looking at in order to, from a practical perspective, make plans, right? And whether that plan is a relationship or what I'm going to do for the rest of the day, building a business, or deciding how to live forever. And it's important to understand the practical aspects of what you're looking at. So, for example, if you're looking at a project and saying, is this possible or not, it's very easy to convince yourself it's not. Or it's very easy to convince yourself it is and just dive head first. If you say, I want to do this, what is it going to take, how long, how many resources, what would I have to devote to it to make this happen? And there might be a really big learning curve. Once you understand what it would take, you can then make an educated choice as to whether or not it's really worth it. Many of the times we fail, it's not because we couldn't, it's because it wasn't actually, either we didn't know what we needed to do, so we did the wrong things or we didn't do enough, or when we realized how hard it was going to be, we said, actually that's not worth it to me in the end. So you need to know how worth it, like how much you're willing to give and how much it's really going to take. And when you can plan that way, then there is no can or can't do or difference. It's just how long and what will it take to get me there.
Well said. I guess my biggest problem with that prayer is, like you were saying, like it could maybe someone could use that prayer as an excuse to accept death, right? They think, oh, well, I can't change it, and so I'll just accept it. Like that's my problem with that prayer, just personally. But awesome.
Well, find me one quote in the history of all the world that cannot accidentally be misinterpreted to cause harm, and I don't know, give you whatever you want. That's the thing, is like we as human beings are fallible creatures, and when we want to believe something, we'll take any evidence in front of us and make it mean the thing we want to. So I guess my final words to you guys would be, there is a lot of misinformation out there, and there are a lot of good theories, and ultimately what's going to make you successful not only at living forever but at enjoying and thriving in the life that you live every day is pay attention to what's real and what's not. Don't get stuck in your own kind of hopes and dreams of what is, but look at what's real and work with it and have fun with it, and you will be miles ahead of the rest of the human race.
All right, last question, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to plug your websites, but last question of this interview. Are you a fan of eternal life? Are you a fan of the idea of living forever? Would you want to live forever personally? Why or why not?
I am a big fan of the idea of living forever. I think if we die, it should be a choice and not a necessity. There are going to be some really interesting social challenges that come up when people don't die. For example, one of them is overpopulation, or having more children. One of them is that how will we evolve culturally? Right now, a lot of cultural evolution happens because the old people who had old beliefs die off and the new generation takes things forward. When that doesn't happen, we are going to have to learn as individuals to kill our own old beliefs and adopt new beliefs so that we stay mentally young forever. That, in many ways, could be even more challenging than physiologically living forever. So it's going to be a very interesting world, but that is where the world is heading, I think, whether we like it or not, and good thing everyone watching this likes it, because that's the future of the world. So let's embrace it, let's love it, and then let's figure out, since we are going to live forever, what we want that to look like. That's what Achieve Vitality is all about. It's like, let's not just be alive, let's be vital.
Yes!
And what is that going to look like as a globe? Yep.
I love it. Eternal life. Woo! All right. All right. I love that. I love that you're a fan of the idea of living forever. Okay. So just last opportunity. I guess we'll conclude this interview. It's been wonderful. Just give the audience your links, your website, Metamed, Achieve Vitality.
Yeah, absolutely. So we didn't really go into a lot of depth about my other project, which is Achieve Vitality. The basis is that within 30 years, I want every single person on this planet to be living completely unlimited by the thoughts in their own head, unlimited by social pressure to be a certain way, and unlimited by resource distribution issues. There should be enough to go around so that we can all create the life we want every day, because that's why we're alive to begin with. So I'm a systems architect deep inside my heart, and I think a lot about what does the world need to look like, what are the institutions or structures that create the infrastructure for that world to exist, what are the social structures, how do we need to relate to each other, and how do we need to think about ourselves and the world around us to live that way. So I do everything from personal growth, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, to business consulting and systems architecture, to all sorts of crazy, awesome global projects. The Metamed side, obviously a big piece of that, because we need a solid health system to keep us not only alive but healthy and thriving, and I see Metamed as the future of that. It was really cool. Our CEO, who was himself a physician as well as a businessman, gave this great speech the other day, and he was like, I was a physician and I wanted to make a difference, and I realized as a doctor I really couldn't, and I searched everywhere across the globe to find what I thought was actually going to change medicine, and that's why I'm at Metamed, because I really believe that personalization is the future, and taking all of the amazing resources that are out there, all of the amazing data that's out there, putting it together, thinking about it effectively, and turning that into real, tangible results that change people's lives. That's what we're all about, right? So really, they're kind of two sides of the same project, which is how do we have optimal health and have complete control over our own bodies, and then once those bodies are here to stay, what do we do with life to really make it enjoyable? So I'm happy to answer any questions anyone's got. To email me, and I can post this somewhere so that you'll have access, is brenda@achievevitality.com or brenda@metamed.com. And you can check out what we do at either of those websites, achievevitality.com or metamed.com. And thanks so much, guys, for listening. It's been really awesome being here and chatting with you guys, and thanks for all the great questions. I'll see you again sometime soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Brenda. And, I'd love to have you back sometime. Maybe we could talk more about Achieve Vitality and get more into the details of that sometime. But thank you so much. You've been a delight to interview.
It would be fun. Thank you so much, Ron. It's been a pleasure. Ciao.
Bye.